Thank you so much, Miriam. I'm so grateful to be back with everyone today, and especially to my friend Miriam. And thank you, Miriam, for filling in for Mark and Josh. And thanks to Adi for handling our tech so smoothly. And I'm so grateful to be with everyone today. Let's just begin with a few breaths and perhaps a few stretches to get settled and feel each other's presence and feel gratitude for this gathering. So just a few deep breaths. This melody, Elit Zion, lament Zion and her cities, is sung at this special time of year. These are the 3 weeks, a period of mourning, Bein Hamitzarim, between the straits, between the narrows. From the 17th of Tammuz, a few weeks ago, until Tish B'Av, this coming Sunday, we feel this constriction, this metzar. We commemorate the destruction of our temples, first by Nebuchadnezzar II in 586 BCE, and then by the Romans in 70 CE, that subsequently led to our exile from the land of Israel. Other Jewish tragedies are associated with this time. Moses breaking the tablets when he saw the golden calf, the 12 spies returning to Moses, and 10 of them giving their devastating report. The expulsion of the Jews from Spain in 1492, and many others. The Talmud says that God marked this time for tragedy because of the incident with the spies and their negative report. This story from Numbers, with only Caleb and Joshua bringing positive reports, is retold in this week's Torah portion. We have just begun Devarim, Deuteronomy, the 5th book of the Torah. The people cried out, they were scared. Yet God declared, "You wept without cause. I will therefore make this an eternal day of mourning for you." Talmud tractate Ta'anit says that God then decreed that on the 9th of Av, the temple would be destroyed and Israel would go into exile. However, God also said in this week's portion, don't be afraid. Al tira. Adi, if you could put up the text for today. Al tira ve'al techat. Be not afraid, nor be dismayed. Lo ta'artsun ve'lo tiri'un mehem. You shall not dread and you shall not fear them. Speaking of the lands where they were scouting. These words, al tira, come frequently in the Tanakh. Adi, you can put the text down again. We'll come back to it in a moment. These words, al tira, one of my favorite places is in the Haftarah for Lech Lecha, Isaiah 41:10. Al tira, ki imacha ani. Have no fear, for I am with you. Don't be afraid, for I am your God. I will give you strength. I will help you. I will uphold you. As Rabbi Jenny said yesterday, God is with us, preparing the places for our journey, as it says in our portion. Some of you may remember that each time I have come and been with you during this past year, I have connected the Torah portion to a psalm. Just as the Torah is divided into 5 books, so the book of Psalms is divided into 5 books. So we have begun each new book of the Torah, and I have invited it into conversation with the first psalm in each book. Today, for book 5, we explore Psalm 107. This is a longer psalm, 43 verses, and it begins with joyous words. Adi, you can share the screen again. Hodu ladonai ki tov, ki leolam chasto. In this beautiful translation by Rabbi Levi, give thanks to Adonai who is good, for eternal is God's covenantal love. Hodu ladonai ki tov, ki leolam chasto. These words may be familiar from the Psalms of Hallel. In this very psalm, this verse of thanksgiving is repeated 4 more times with similar words. And there's another pattern, again repeated 4 times. You'll see those words in verse 6. Vayitzaku el Adonai. They sobbed to Adonai, batsar lahem, in their distress, who saved them from the constricted places. Mi mitzukotehem yatzilem. The pattern in this psalm, crying out to God, being in distress, in constriction, feeling God's embrace and grace, and then expressing gratitude to God. I know I have felt that fear many times. And then, with the gift of stillness, of silence, of breath, I have been released from that anxiety. Perhaps you have too. Finally, we can express gratitude to God. God as we understand God, each of us, perhaps differently. Perhaps it's that way for you too. As Rabbi Jenny said yesterday, thank you, God. Todah. Thank you, thank you. So we're going to have a long period of silence today, and we will begin our silence with other verses from Psalm 107 and an excerpt from a poem by Pablo Neruda. Later in the Psalm 107, which was not really a familiar psalm to me, I have been studying psalms from this beautiful book, Songs Ascending by Rabbi Levi, with my Chevruta partner, my IJS Chevruta partner this year. And we've really enjoyed studying them, the Psalms. And 107 was not familiar, but verse 29 says, Yakem se'ara li dimama, vayecheshu galehem. You raised the storm to stillness, and its waves grew silent. They rejoiced that they were quiet, and God led them to the haven of their delight. Vayismechu chi yishtoku, vayanchem el mechoz cheftzam. You raised the storm. You had the storm come to stillness, and its waves grew silent. Dimama. They rejoiced that they were quiet, and God led them to the haven of their delight. So I invite you to settle into your place, enter into this stillness. Allow your breath to slow. Perhaps you are crying from a place of fear and need to hear these comforting words, Al Tira, Don't be afraid. Perhaps you are in a place of sadness for this Jewish time of our year. Perhaps you will be able to feel God's presence in our sit, and perhaps gratitude will come with the stillness. Keeping quiet, Pablo Neruda. Now we will count to 12, and we will all keep still. For once on the face of the earth, let's not speak in any language. Let's stop for a second and not move our arms so much. It would be an exotic moment without rush, without engines. We would all be together in a sudden strangeness. If we were not so single-minded about keeping our lives moving and for once could do nothing, perhaps a huge silence might interrupt this sadness. Now I will count up to 12, and you keep quiet, and I will go. About 10 minutes of silence, and then I will bring you back with my voice. May we be able to sob and cry out to God. May we be able to hear the words, Al Tira, be not afraid. And may we be able to give thanks to God. Toda, Hodu, Ladonai Kitov. Hodu, Ladonai Kitov. Ki le'olam chasto. Hodu l'Adonai ki tov, ki le'olam chasto. Hodu l'Adonai ki tov, ki le'olam chasto. Hodu Ki tov, ki le'olam chasdo. Hodu l'Adonai 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 ki tov, ki le'olam chasto. Give thanks to Adonai, who is good. Give thanks to Adonai, who is good. Eternal is God's love, God's eternal love. Eternal is God's love, God's eternal love. Hodu l'Adonai ki tov, ki le'olam chasto. Hodu l'Adonai ki tov, ki le'olam chasto. Thank you.
Thank you, Louise. Invite all who wish to join in the Kaddish now. And if you'd like to share names in the chat, you may, of those for whom you're saying Kaddish, observing Yartzeit today. And if you're able and would like to stand, please do so. And we can unmute ourselves as we say the Kaddish together. Yikadal v'yikadash
Amen.
Say shalom b'mrama. Say shalom. Ekol Yisrael. Amen.
Miriam, you have to unmute yourself.
Thank you, Adi. Thank you. And thank you, Louise, for guiding us in our sit today, your teaching, your presence, and song. And thank you, Adi, for helping us mute when we should mute, unmute when we should be heard, and otherwise keeping all of this technology functioning so that we can practice and be together today. Thank you. For those of you who need to conclude and be on your way today, thank you for joining us again today and participating in this practice of our daily sit with IJS. And if you would like to, and want to stay for the next 10, 15 minutes, we have time for some questions questions and conversation with Louise to take us a little deeper, to unpack the practice, perhaps to learn a little bit more about, for Louise to share with us a little bit more about your understanding, Louise, and relationship to this practice. Folks, you're invited to please, if you have questions, to put them into the chat. Perhaps we can't promise to get to every question, but it's a fruitful continuation of our learning. So, Louise, I want to begin by first of all thanking you for this rich terrain, this rich arena you've opened up for us in this context of this month of Av, this time of precariousness and fragility and fear at this time in the Jewish calendar year that we're collectively participating in. By acknowledging, first of all, that it is here on that collective level, and then bringing it more personally to our own experience individually, and opening the opportunity to engage in this mindfulness practice, reflecting on what each of us are, what we may be experiencing in these ways, and how the practice of stillness can help be with this time, or a time in one's life in which, the fear and the fragility are present.
I found it was the finding text within the Torah portion and then finding something within the Psalm has been so powerful for me. And to find this pattern in Psalm 107, where it, was calling out to God and being afraid and being like sobbing. The Rabbi Levy's translation is such a beautiful book. It's a 2-volume book. I know someone asked the question, what's the title of the book? And by the way, all of this, the title of the book and the texts are all in my source sheet that Adi shared the link to, I assume. And and my contact information is there as well. But it's called Songs Ascending. And it's basically it's a new translation of the book of Psalms by Rabbi Richard Levy of blessed memory. And then he has a spiritual interpretation after he talks about his way of translating the psalm. It's been beautiful to be studying it, and then by doing it with IJS on a regular basis over these 5 new books, I've learned new psalms that I never knew. Psalm 107 and some of the other psalms that are at the beginning of each book. So I'm seeing some questions. Lori says there seems to be a contradiction, both an invitation to sob and cry out and seek comfort, while at the same time, when the scouts cried out, there was a kind of disdain, disappointment, and almost punishment from God, teaching us to be stoic and not express fear or ask for help. Very interesting. Thank you, Lori. That's a great question. For me, I like when I went into silence today because of the teaching and just, feeling everyone's presence here. For me, I started getting teary and just feeling like, wow, it's a sad time of year. And just that melody that I started with, the Elite Sion, is just a sobbing melody. I need to feel whatever feelings I'm feeling. I guess I'm stoic in some ways, but I try to at least admit to myself, if not to others, the feelings that I'm feeling, because it allows me then to ask for help. Just like Psalm 107 was saying, first they're crying out and they're, upset, and then, and in fact, the exact situation was 4 different times that they were talking to God and saying, like, we messed up and we were really upset and we're sorry that we messed up in these situations. And the wording's a little different for each of the repeats, which was also interesting. and it wasn't Hodu Ladonai Ki Tov each time. It was a little different gratitude words. But for me, I want to be able to feel those feelings and express them. I think that God was upset, if we can be, if we can put words in God's mouth, as the Talmud did, that it was important to be able to see the good in the land. And so that's just, they are contradictions, being able to feel the feelings and be able to see the good. And for me, seeing feeling the feelings and seeing the good in accepting those feelings is important too. So,
Louise, my relationship to sitting to mindfulness practice is, I think my understanding or assumption is that when we sit and we quiet, it's not to suppress feelings or encourage stoicism, but rather to encourage the capacity to bear witness to what's arising and passing, which includes the whole gamut of emotions within the heart, within our bodies, of thoughts in the mind, all of those things that arise and pass. And as I hear you speaking, that's how I'm interpreting what I'm hearing you say. That sort of is not a solution to this wonderful, important question, but sort of a response of engagement with it.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, Miriam, that it's not a time to suppress the feelings. It's a time to, with the silence and with the calming of the waves and with the, that dimama, that silent, that still voice, that you can't hear the still voice if you're running around, doing everything. That we have to do those things too. We have to do the dishes and the laundry and, do our jobs and, take our kids or our grandkids out. But if we find that time to sit, which that's why IJS has been so important for me, and I know many people in this room, that it's been a place where we've been able to come all year since last March. And it's sort of guided my day. I still tell people, I'm not free from 12:20 until 1:15. It's been great. Also, I just want to say those words al tira, when in my congregation where I was for 20 years, I had a gift that I found. It was such a gift that I gave myself, of allowing myself to write a special song for each bar bat mitzvah kid. And I would draw from their Torah portion, from their Haftarah portion, from their Devar Torah, from their name. And Al Tira, one of my favorites was from Lech Lecha. And the Al Tira was, I would sing to this bar mitzvah kid, Al Tira, be not afraid. God is with you this day. Anochi magen lach. May God shield you from harm on your way. So these little pieces, I connect to, now they're adults. I retired from my pulpit 13 years ago. And it's, these kids are now adults, but I think of them and think of the song that I created for them. And those words, Al Tira, are ones that I sing to myself often. And they come frequently in the Tanakh in various grammatical forms. So I see Anna's saying something that she's reminded of, may the words of my mouth and meditations of my heart be acceptable. Yeah, that's beautiful, beautiful. So, and the Hodu Ladonai Ki Tov, each time that I come to a new psalm, I say, well, what verse can I set to music? And this one, I said, well, it's a pretty common verse, but I just wanted to play with it. And I have to say, when I finally wrote it down a few days ago, I realized that I had like 10 versions of it, that because I wanted to play with it and wanted to see what came out of it. And so it felt good to be able to go from the sad melody of Elit Sion to the more joyous Hodu Ladonai Ki Tov. And in fact, that's the melody of Elit Sion is one that's sung for Lecha Dodi during these 3 weeks. Was able to share that with my congregation last week for Lecha Dodi.
That's so beautiful. I want to call attention to Wendy, who says, so beautiful and what a gift to each child and to us, and to thank you. I agree wholeheartedly.
Yeah.
I'm curious about the relationship between your singing and stilling, the silence and the song.
Oh, that's a really, really good question. And in fact, there's a beautiful reading in the Reformed prayer book, Mishkan Tefillah, that talks about the with the fire, that you need the air, you need the space. The logs they can't be tightly done in order for the fire to burn. You need space between the logs. And the same is true with music. There's the space between the notes, the breathing after, the breathing before. And so much, like I sing in the Zamir Chorale of Boston, and we've done concerts all over the world and around the United States as well. And one of the things that our conductor, Joshua Jacobson, talks about is breathing together, and the space, that silence before the music starts. We have to be in that moment. When we were in Berlin, we would go for a Jewish music festival in Berlin regularly, and we sang a piece by Louis Lewandowski, Enosh, which is something that's done for memorial services, and it's very powerful and beautiful choral piece written in the 19th century. And in order to get us into the mood, there's a beautiful organ introduction. We all bowed our heads and just listened to this whole page of music from the organ in this sanctuary of this recreated, rebuilt, or renovated, I guess, sanctuary that holds 2,000 people, and it was full for the concert. I mean, Berlin comes to this; it's incredible, and we listened before we were ready to sing, and then these words. It was like this meditation. I mean, we created a meditation space for everybody else, and it helped us too. I mean, the singers went into that meditative space, and I think it was the silence before the music started with the organ, before the music with our singing, and we breathed together. And that's a lot of what conducting is to feel the breath together. So, and I know that's also true with delivering a sermon. Either when I give a Devar Torah or when a rabbi colleague gives a Devar Torah, and he or she's asked me to sing something after the sermon, I wait before I start to sing. And it makes all the difference. If you jump in immediately with, right after the words of the Devar Torah are finished with, a song, it takes away from the holiness of the moment, I feel.
Yeah, that spaciousness to actually find ourselves in the silence so that we can absorb the content and cultivate the qualities, or focus our intentions towards the cultivation of, as you suggest, Hodu, the gratitude that we can, perhaps from the mourning and from places of fear. And and whatnot, to soften, to be quiet, to hear that, allow that, and then, as you suggest, a consolation, and then a shift, perhaps to cultivate gratitude. Thank you for putting, I see you put in the chat, Louise,
Yes.
Zamir
The
Chorale.
Zamir Chorale of Boston, and zamir.org. And we have, there's lots of one of the things that's important about the choir is that it's not only about giving concerts, it's about educating people. And we commission new music, and we just celebrated our 50th anniversary. Josh Jacobson started the choir when he was just graduating from college in 1969. So we had a big celebration, and then sadly we've been able to be on Zoom all year, but it's been, hearing recordings and singing along. And luckily, I think we're going to get back together in this fall.
Well, Louise, God willing, God willing, and
Yes.
I see that we're at our time for today. But I want to thank you on behalf of IJS, and if I could be so bold as to speak for all of us here today. Thank you, even through this medium of Zoom, not in person, lending us your guidance, your voice, your song, and your capacity to be in the stillness and the silence, to help guide us in our practice and to help us take this practice into our lives. Thank you.
Well,
Thank you.
Thank you, Miriam, so much for being the host, and to Adi for holding us, and wishing everyone a good week, and take care.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you again,
Thank
Louise.
you.
We'll be
Thank
back
you.
tomorrow, 12:30 Eastern time, for another sit. And meanwhile, blessings on today. Al Tira.